Hello everyone. Today, Biker Justice Analyst bring you a story full of humanity and compassion. Enjoy listening.
A Hell's Angel biker found a girl feeding her baby under the rain, unaware she'd lost everything but hope. The rumble of Jack Malone's Harley cut through the steady drumming of rain on asphalt. Water pelted his leather vest, soaking through to his skin despite the heavy fabric of his clothes. The afternoon had turned dark as ink, storm clouds hanging low and menacing over the rundown neighborhood. Empty beer cans and scattered trash tumbled across the cracked sidewalks, driven by gusts of wind. Jack's hands gripped the handlebars tighter as he navigated through deep puddles. The familiar weight of his bike kept him steady, even as the rain made the road slick and treacherous. His long beard was plastered to his chest, and rivulets of water ran down his tattooed arms. The weather matched his mood, dark and brooding. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. Lightning flashed overhead, followed by a crack of thunder that seemed to shake the very ground. Jack barely flinched. He'd weathered worse storms than this, both literal and metaphorical. The neighborhood around him was a ghost town, with boarded-up windows and peeling paint telling stories of better days long gone. It reminded him of places he used to frequent in his darker days, when the Hell's Angels patch on his back meant more than just a memory. Through the sheets of rain, something caught his eye. A splash of faded blue, an umbrella that had seen better days. Beneath it, huddled against the elements, sat a woman. She was trying to shield something in her arms, her body curled protectively around a small bundle. As Jack drew closer, the sound of a baby's cry pierced through the storm's fury. Jack slowed his bike, his boots scraping the wet pavement. The woman was young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair plastered to her face. Her clothes were soaked through, and the umbrella she clutched was missing several spokes, barely providing any protection. In her arms, a baby, couldn't be more than a year old, fussed as she attempted to feed it, trying desperately to keep the bottle dry. The sight stirred something in Jack's chest, an unfamiliar ache that cut through his hardened exterior. He'd seen plenty of suffering in his time, had caused his fair share of it too. But this was different. The woman's shoulders were slumped in defeat, her movements speaking of bone-deep exhaustion. She didn't even look up as his motorcycle idled nearby, too focused on her struggling attempt to care for her child in these miserable conditions. Jack's hands tightened on the handlebars again, but this time in resolution rather than tension. The tough guy image he'd worn like armor for so many years seemed to crack just a little. Without fully understanding why, he found himself pulling his bike to the curb, cutting the engine. The woman finally looked up at the sound of his boots hitting the wet pavement. Fear flashed across her face, a reaction Jack was used to. He knew what he looked like, a big, bearded man covered in tattoos, wearing a Hell's Angels vest. She clutched her baby closer, her body tensing as if preparing to run. But for once, Jack didn't want to be feared. The rain continued to pour as he stood there, trying to make himself appear less threatening. The baby's cry grew louder, mixing with the sound of thunder overhead. Jack took a step forward, his heart softening further as he watched the woman try to comfort her child, while simultaneously shrinking away from his approach. The woman stared up at Jack through wet strands of hair, her arms tightening around her crying baby. Her eyes were wide with fear, but there was something else there too, a flicker of desperate hope, quickly masked by suspicion. The broken umbrella tilted precariously above her, sending a stream of water down her already soaked shoulder. "Ma'am," Jack said, keeping his voice soft despite its natural gruffness, You shouldn't be out here in this weather. Not with a little one." He stayed where he was, knowing his size alone could be intimidating. The rain continued to pour, plastering his t-shirt to his chest beneath his leather vest. The baby's cries grew stronger, tiny fists waving in the air. The woman tried to shift position, attempting to shield her child from the rain while keeping a wary eye on Jack. The motion caused the umbrella to tilt further, dumping more water onto them both. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice trembled. "We're fine. Please just—" She couldn't seem to finish the sentence, her teeth chattering from the cold. Jack took a slow step forward, his boots splashing in a puddle. "I've got a place," he said. "It's warm, dry. You can wait out the storm there." He gestured to his bike, then immediately regretted it when she flinched at his movement. "I don't," she started, then stopped as another crack of thunder boomed overhead. The baby wailed louder, and she bounced him gently, making shushing sounds that were lost in the storm. "Name's Jack," he offered, trying to make himself seem less threatening. "I know how this looks. Big scary biker offering help to a woman and her baby. Sounds like the beginning of a bad story." He managed a small smile, though his heart ached at the fear in her eyes. "But I promise you, ma'am, I just want to help." She studied him for a long moment, her gaze moving from his tattooed arms to the patch on his vest, then up to his face. The baby had settled slightly, hiccuping between sobs. Finally she spoke again, her voice barely audible over the rain. "I'm Kayla." Jack nodded, encouraged by this small offering of trust. "Nice to meet you, Kayla. Look, I've got a spare jacket in my saddlebag. At least let me give you that for the little one." Kayla's resolve seemed to waver as she looked down at her crying child. A particularly strong gust of wind chose that moment to completely invert her umbrella, leaving them totally exposed to the downpour. She let out a small sound of defeat. "How far?" she asked, her voice carrying a mix of resignation and hope. 20 minutes, Jack replied honestly. "I've got a cabin just outside town. You can use my phone there. Call whoever you need to." Kayla stood slowly, her clothes heavy with water. She took one step toward Jack, then hesitated. "If you try anything," she started, trying to sound fierce despite her obvious vulnerability. Jack held up his hands. "You have my word, just trying to help a mama and her baby out of the rain." The storm raged around them as Kayla considered her options. Finally, with visible reluctance, she nodded. "Okay," she whispered, clutching her baby closer. "Okay." Jack moved carefully, retrieving his spare jacket from the saddlebag. He helped Kayla wrap it around herself and the baby, creating a makeshift shelter against the rain. As she settled behind him on the motorcycle, he could feel how tightly she held on. Not out of trust, but necessity. Her body was tense, ready to jump off at the first sign of danger. The motorcycle rumbled through the rain-slicked streets, leaving the city behind. Kayla's arms were wrapped tightly around Jack's waist, her baby secured between them in the makeshift shelter of his spare jacket. The tension in her grip told him everything he needed to know about her trust, or lack of it. As they wound their way up into the wooded hills, the rain began to ease. The air grew cooler, filled with the sharp scent of wet pine needles. Jack felt Kayla shift slightly behind him, probably taking in their increasingly remote surroundings. He wanted to reassure her, but knew any words would be lost to the wind and engine noise. The cabin appeared around a bend in the road, small but solid against the darkening sky. Jack pulled up under the covered carport, cutting the engine. The sudden silence felt heavy. "This is it," he said quietly, helping Kayla steady herself as she climbed off the bike. Her legs were shaky, and her clothes were still soaked despite his jacket. The baby had fallen asleep during the ride, his tiny face peaceful against his mother's chest. Jack fumbled with his keys, conscious of how his large hands might appear to someone who'd learned to fear men's strength. He pushed open the door, reaching in to flip on the lights. "It's not much," he said, "but it's dry." The cabin's interior was simple but clean. A small living room with a worn couch, a basic kitchen, and 2 doors leading to what Kayla assumed were a bedroom and bathroom. A wood stove sat cold in one corner. "Bathroom's through there," Jack said, pointing. "I've got some clean towels under the sink. And, there's some of my sister's clothes in the bedroom closet. They might be a bit big, but they're dry." Kayla stood just inside the door, dripping onto the welcome mat. "Thank you," she whispered, the words seeming to cost her something. "Go on and get changed," Jack said, moving toward the kitchen. "I'll fix us something to eat." While Kayla was in the bathroom, Jack moved efficiently around the kitchen, pulling out ingredients for a simple meal. He could hear water running, the soft murmur of Kayla's voice as she talked to her baby. He focused on cooking, trying to give her the space she clearly needed. When she emerged, wearing an oversized sweater and sweatpants, her hair damp but no longer dripping, Jack had 2 bowls of hot soup and some grilled cheese sandwiches ready. The baby was wrapped in a clean towel, looking content and sleepy. "There's a bassinet in the bedroom," Jack said, surprising himself. At Kayla's questioning look, he added, "From when my sister visited with her kid last month." Kayla carefully laid her son in the bassinet, which Jack had moved to the living room. She kept glancing between her baby and Jack, like she couldn't decide which needed more watching. "Eat while it's hot," Jack said, setting the food on the small table. He sat down first, trying to appear as non-threatening as possible. Kayla joined him hesitantly, picking up her spoon. The first sip of soup seemed to break something in her. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until that moment. They ate in silence, the rain pattering against the windows, the only sound besides the occasional clink of spoons against bowls. Neither of them spoke much, but the quiet wasn't entirely uncomfortable. Jack noticed how Kayla's shoulders gradually relaxed, how she stopped flinching when he moved. For his part, he found himself watching the gentle way she checked on her sleeping baby between bites, the careful manner in which she handled the warm mug of tea he'd made after dinner. The fire crackled softly in the wood stove, casting warm shadows across the cabin's living room. Jack sat in his old leather armchair, his large frame somehow looking less intimidating in the gentle firelight. Across from him, Kayla had settled onto the couch, her sleeping baby cradled in her arms. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows, but inside, the atmosphere was cozy and safe. Jack cleared his throat softly, his rough hands clasped together. "You don't have to talk about anything you don't want to," he said, his voice low and careful. "But if you need help, or if there's someone I can call." Kayla's fingers traced small circles on her baby's blanket. Her eyes, tired and red-rimmed, stayed fixed on her son's peaceful face. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the pop of burning wood and the baby's soft breathing. "I don't have anyone to call," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've been on our own for 3 months now." She swallowed hard, and Jack could see her gathering her strength. Moving from shelter to shelter, trying to stay ahead of him. Jack remained still, afraid that any movement might cause her to retreat back into silence. The weight of her words hung in the air. "My husband—" Kayla's voice cracked slightly. She took a deep breath before continuing. "He wasn't always violent, or maybe he was. and I just didn't see it at first. It started small, angry outbursts, throwing things, blaming me for everything that went wrong. Her fingers tightened on the blanket. Then he started using his fists. The muscle in Jack's jaw clenched, but he kept his face neutral, his posture open and non-threatening. He'd seen enough violence in his past to recognize the shadows it left behind. The night I left, Kayla continued, her voice stronger now, as if each word was helping her shed a burden. He came home drunk, more drunk than usual. He was screaming about losing his job, about how worthless we both were. She looked down at her baby, who stirred slightly but didn't wake. When he knocked over the bassinet, I knew I couldn't stay. Not anymore. Not with my baby in danger. Jack nodded slowly, understanding flooding his features. You did the right thing, he said softly. Getting out. Protecting your kid. Tears began to roll down Kayla's cheeks, but she didn't move, to wipe them away. We've been running ever since. The shelters help, but they're always full. And he keeps finding us. Someone always tells him where we are. Her voice trembled. I don't know how much longer I can keep running. The fire popped loudly, making Kayla jump. Jack leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle but firm. You're safe here. Nobody knows about this place except my sister, and she wouldn't tell a soul. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. You can stay as long as you need to. No pressure, no strings attached. Kayla finally looked up, meeting his eyes. The fear and exhaustion were still there, but something else too. A tiny spark of hope, fragile as a candle flame. Why? She asked. Why would you help us? You don't even know us. Jack sat back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Because everyone deserves a chance to find peace, he said simply. Sometimes they just need someone to give them that chance. The night grew deeper, but neither Jack nor Kayla seemed to notice the passing hours. The baby had drifted into a peaceful sleep, his tiny chest rising and falling in a gentle rhythm against Kayla's shoulder. She'd shifted to a more comfortable position on the couch, her rigid posture from earlier gradually softening. Jack moved quietly to add another log to the fire, his movements careful not to disturb the sleeping child. The wooden floorboards creaked softly under his heavy boots as he returned to his chair. He looks comfortable, Jack observed, nodding toward the sleeping baby. What's his name? Noah, Kayla replied, a small smile touching her lips for the first time that evening. He's usually fussy with strangers, but he seems at peace here. She glanced around the cabin's rustic interior, taking in the simple furnishings and the wall of books that lined one side of the room. Kids are good judges of character, Jack said, his voice carrying a warmth that seemed at odds with his intimidating appearance. Better than most adults, I'd say. Kayla studied him for a moment, noting how the firelight softened the hard edges of his face. The tattoos that covered his arms told stories she couldn't read, but there was kindness in his eyes that made her want to trust him, despite everything her past had taught her about trusting others. You mentioned earlier that you understand about needing peace, she ventured carefully. What did you mean by that? Jack rubbed his beard thoughtfully, considering his words. I wasn't always the person I am now, he admitted. Used to run with a rough crowd, did things I'm not proud of. He paused, his eyes distant. Someone gave me a chance when I needed it most, changed everything. And now you live out here alone? Found my peace in the quiet, he nodded. Sometimes the world gets too loud, you know? Out here, a person can hear themselves think. Noah stirred slightly, making small sounds in his sleep. Kayla adjusted him gently, patting his back with practiced ease. The simple action seemed to ground her, bringing her back to the reality of her situation. I should probably get him to bed, she said softly, though she made no immediate move to stand. Guest room's all made up, Jack replied. Down the hall, first door on the right. Bathroom's right across. There's extra blankets in the chest if you need them. Kayla nodded, feeling the weight of gratitude and uncertainty pressing on her chest. Part of her wanted to grab Noah and run. It's what experience had taught her to do. But another part, a tired part that had been running for so long, yearned for the safety this cabin seemed to offer. Thank you, she whispered, finally rising from the couch. For everything. Jack simply nodded, understanding in his eyes. Later, lying in the unfamiliar bed with Noah sleeping soundly in a makeshift crib beside her, Kayla stared at the ceiling. The rain had finally stopped, and moonlight filtered through the window, casting silver patterns on the wall. The bed was comfortable, the room warm, but sleep eluded her. Her mind raced with questions. Was she crazy to trust a stranger? Should she leave before sunrise? What if Jack wasn't who he seemed to be? But then she remembered the genuine kindness in his eyes, the careful way he moved around Noah, the simple offer of shelter with no expectations attached. She rolled onto her side, watching Noah's peaceful sleep. For the first time in months, they were truly warm and dry, with a roof over their heads that didn't come with a time limit. Yet the comfort of the moment battled with the instincts that had kept them alive these past months, leaving her torn between gratitude and fear, hope and caution. Morning sunlight streamed through the cabin windows as Jack moved around his small kitchen. The sizzle of bacon and the rich aroma of coffee filled the air. He'd been up since dawn, wanting to make sure his guests had a proper breakfast. Kayla emerged from the guest room, carrying Noah, who was already wide awake and curious about his new surroundings. Her hair was damp from a shower, and she looked more rested than she had the night before. "Something smells wonderful," she said, adjusting Noah on her hip. Jack turned from the stove, spatula in hand. "Hope you like eggs and bacon. Coffee's ready too if you want some." "That would be amazing." Kayla settled Noah into a chair, using some books Jack had stacked to make a makeshift high chair. "I haven't had a real breakfast in... well, it's been a while." They fell into a comfortable rhythm, Jack serving the food, while Kayla tended to Noah, cutting up small pieces of scrambled egg for him. The morning light made everything feel less intense than it had the night before, as if the shadows of their pasts had temporarily retreated. "You mentioned last night," Kayla began carefully, "about understanding what it's like to need peace, about someone giving you a chance." Jack sat down with his coffee, his large frame making the kitchen chair seem small. He was quiet for a moment, considering his words. "I was angry for a long time," he finally said. "Rode with the angels, lived fast and dangerous, didn't care who I hurt." He glanced down at his tattooed arms, evidence of that former life. "Then one day I ran into Tommy, an old friend from before all that. He was a pastor by then." Kayla watched him, noting how his expression softened at the memory. "Tommy didn't judge me," Jack continued. "Just invited me to coffee. Kept inviting me, week after week. Listened when I needed to talk, stayed quiet when I needed silence." He took a sip of his coffee. "Showed me there was another way to live." Noah babbled happily, reaching for another piece of egg. Jack smiled at him, and Kayla noticed how the smile transformed his whole face. "What happened then?" she asked. "Took time, but I started making different choices. Left the club, found this place." He gestured around the cabin. "Tommy helped me see that the person I'd become wasn't who I had to be." Kayla nodded, understanding in her eyes. "It's hard to believe you can be different than what life's made you." "Yeah," Jack agreed. "But sometimes all it takes is one person believing in you." He paused, then added quietly, "Tommy passed away last year. Cancer." But what he did for me." He trailed off, emotion thick in his voice. Kayla reached across the table, briefly touching his hand. The gesture surprised them both, but neither pulled away immediately. "That's why you stopped for us yesterday," she said softly. "You were paying it forward." Jack shrugged, but his eyes were kind. "Maybe. Or maybe I just couldn't stand seeing a mama and baby out in the rain." They finished breakfast in comfortable silence, broken only by Noah's happy babbling and the clink of forks against plates. Kayla watched Jack as he cleared the dishes, his movements gentle despite his size. She saw now what she couldn't see clearly last night. A man who'd fought his way back from darkness, who'd learned to be kind despite life's cruelties. For the first time in months, she felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. It wasn't trust, not completely. She wasn't ready for that yet. But it was hope, small and fragile as a butterfly's wing, but present all the same. The afternoon sun painted long shadows across Jack's front porch as they sat in his old wooden rocking chairs. The storm from yesterday had cleared, leaving behind a fresh, clean scent in the air. Birds chirped in the nearby trees, and a gentle breeze rustled through the leaves. Jack had brought out some lemonade, pouring it into mismatched glasses that showed how rarely he had company. Kayla held Noah on her lap, the little boy contentedly playing with a soft teddy bear Jack had found in an old box of donations he'd meant to take to the church. "This is nice," Kayla said softly, looking out at the trees surrounding the cabin. "Peaceful. Different from the city." Jack nodded, his large frame making the rocking chair creak slightly. "That's why I chose this place. After everything, needed somewhere quiet to think." Noah looked up from his teddy bear, his small fingers gripping its worn fur. His eyes, bright and curious, fixed on Jack's face. Jack smiled at him, the kind of gentle smile that seemed at odds with his rough exterior, but had become more frequent since their arrival. "He likes you," Kayla observed, adjusting Noah on her lap. "He's usually shy around strangers." "Kid's got good instincts," Jack replied, taking a sip of his lemonade. "They can tell who means them harm and who doesn't." The breeze picked up slightly, carrying the sweet scent of wildflowers from the nearby meadow. Noah reached out toward Jack, making grabbing motions with his tiny hands. Without thinking, Jack leaned forward, letting the boy catch one of his large, calloused fingers. That's when it happened. "Mommy says you're my daddy," Noah said in his small, clear voice. The words hung in the air like suspended raindrops. Jack's hand froze where it was, Noah's tiny fingers still wrapped around his index finger. The peaceful atmosphere of moments ago transformed into something electric, charged with unexpected emotion. Kayla's face flushed red, her eyes widening in shock. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her hands tightened slightly around Noah, not in fear, but in surprise. Jack sat perfectly still, his expression a mixture of confusion and something deeper, more vulnerable. The tough exterior he usually wore seemed to crack slightly, revealing a glimpse of the tender heart beneath. He looked at Noah, then at Kayla, questions filling his eyes. Noah, oblivious to the impact of his words, continued playing with Jack's finger, completely at ease. His innocent statement had shifted something fundamental between the adults, though he couldn't understand what or why. The rocking chairs had stopped moving. Even the birds seemed to have gone quiet. Jack's lemonade glass sat forgotten on the small table between them, condensation running down its sides in silent streams. Kayla looked at Jack, her face still flushed with embarrassment, but there was something else in her expression too, a sort of wondering vulnerability, as if her son's words had given voice to something she hadn't even admitted to herself. She searched for words to explain, to apologize, but found herself oddly comforted by the simple statement, even as it left her flustered. Jack remained still, his usually confident demeanor replaced by a stunned uncertainty. His finger was still caught in Noah's grasp, and he seemed afraid to move, as if any motion might break this strange, delicate moment. The days following Noah's innocent declaration settled into a gentle rhythm at Jack's cabin. Morning sunlight filtered through the kitchen windows as Jack made breakfast, his large hands surprisingly delicate as he flipped pancakes on the old cast-iron skillet. The sweet smell of maple syrup filled the small space. Kayla sat at the wooden table, feeding Noah bits of banana. "You don't have to cook for us every morning," she said, though her grateful smile betrayed how much she appreciated it. "Been nice having people to cook for," Jack replied, his voice gruff but warm. He set a plate of golden pancakes in front of her, decorated with fresh berries he'd picked from the bushes behind his cabin. Throughout the days, Jack found himself watching Kayla when she wasn't looking. He noticed how she hummed softly while doing dishes, the way she carefully folded Noah's tiny clothes, and how her eyes crinkled at the corners when she really smiled. Her strength amazed him, how she'd survived so much but still showed such gentleness with Noah. One afternoon, Jack taught Kayla how to chop firewood. She insisted on learning, wanting to help around the cabin. He stood behind her, showing her how to hold the axe properly. "Like this," he said, his hands carefully adjusting her grip. "Let the weight of the axe do the work." Kayla nodded, concentration etched on her face. When she successfully split a log, her triumphant laugh echoed through the trees. Jack found himself grinning, struck by how natural this all felt. During Noah's naps, they'd sit on the porch, sharing cups of coffee and pieces of their lives. Jack told her about his years with the Hells Angels, about the darkness he'd walked away from. Kayla shared stories of her childhood dreams, the ones she'd had before life took such harsh turns. As evening settled one night, they sat in lawn chairs under a sky full of stars. Noah slept peacefully inside, monitored by the baby monitor sitting between them. The cricket chorus provided a peaceful backdrop to their conversation. "Never thought I'd have this again," Jack said quietly, looking up at the constellation-filled sky. "Have what?" Kayla asked, wrapping her arms around herself in the cool night air. Tacom shrugged off his leather jacket and handed it to her. "Company. Someone to talk to. Been alone so long, I forgot what it was like to—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "To care about someone." Kayla pulled his jacket closer, breathing in the leather scent mixed with something uniquely Jack. Her heart quickened at his words, but fear crept in too. The kind of fear that comes from being hurt too many times before. "I know it's too soon," Jack continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Hell, we barely know each other, but I care about you, Kayla. You and Noah both." Kayla stared at her hands, twisted together in her lap. The words she wanted to say stuck in her throat, held back by memories of broken promises and shattered trust. Instead, she nodded slightly, acknowledging his words without committing to them. The night wrapped around them like a blanket, stars twinkling overhead. They sat in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts, while the sound of crickets and distant owls filled the space where words couldn't yet go. The evening had settled peacefully over Jack's cabin. Noah played with wooden blocks on a blanket while Kayla prepared dinner, the smell of beef stew filling the cozy space. Jack sat in his worn armchair, occasionally glancing up from his newspaper to watch Noah stack the blocks with determined concentration. A sharp knock at the door shattered their quiet routine. Jack stood immediately, his body tensing. Kayla froze by the stove, her hand gripping the wooden spoon. They hadn't had any visitors since she'd arrived. "Stay here," Jack said softly, moving toward the door with careful steps. When he opened it, a thin man in a navy blue windbreaker stood on the porch. His ID badge identified him as being from the local shelter. "Sorry to disturb you," the man said, shifting uncomfortably under Jack's imposing presence. "I'm looking for Kayla Harper. We received a message at the shelter for her." Kayla's heart pounded as she stepped forward, wiping her hands on her jeans. "I'm Kayla." The shelter worker's expression grew serious. "Your husband called the shelter today. He was quite insistent about finding you." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "He said he knows you're somewhere in the area. He's demanding to see his son." The wooden spoon clattered to the floor. Kayla's face drained of color, and her hands began to shake. He found me." Her voice came out as a whisper. "He's been calling shelters in the region," the worker explained. "I thought you should know. He seemed very angry about you leaving." Jack moved closer to Kayla, his presence solid and reassuring behind her. She could feel the warmth radiating from him, but it did little to thaw the ice forming in her chest. "Thank you for letting us know," Jack said firmly, making it clear the conversation was over. After the worker left, Kayla stood rooted to the spot, her mind racing with memories she'd tried so hard to suppress. The sound of breaking glass, screaming matches, doors slamming, all came rushing back. "He'll find me," she whispered, wrapping her arms around herself. "He always does." Noah sensed his mother's distress and crawled over to her, raising his arms to be picked up. She lifted him automatically, holding him close as if he might disappear. "Kayla." Jack's voice was gentle but firm. "Look at me." She raised her eyes to meet his, tears threatening to spill over. "He's not going to hurt you or Noah. Not while I'm here." Jack's jaw was set, his eyes determined. "We'll handle this together." "You don't know him," Kayla said, her voice breaking. "When he's angry, he becomes someone else entirely. I can't let him hurt you too." "I've dealt with men like him before," Jack replied, his voice low and steady. "Men who think their strength gives them the right to hurt others. But you're not alone anymore." Despite Jack's reassurance, fear settled over the cabin like a heavy blanket. Kayla moved, through the motions of serving dinner, but the food remained largely untouched. She kept glancing at the windows, jumping at every sound from the surrounding forest. Noah picked up on her anxiety, becoming fussy and clingy. The safe haven they'd created suddenly felt fragile, as if the walls themselves might crumble under the weight of her past. Jack watched her with concern, seeing how she held Noah a little tighter, how her hands trembled as she cleaned up the kitchen, how she checked the locks on the doors twice, then 3 times. Morning light filtered through the cabin windows, but it brought little comfort. Kayla sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Noah played quietly in his makeshift playpen, seemingly oblivious to the tension in the air. Jack emerged from his bedroom carrying a duffel bag. "I've got some supplies packed," he said, setting it by the door. "First aid kit, flashlights, extra clothes, just in case." Kayla watched him move around the cabin with purpose, checking windows and doors. His movements were precise, calculated, the actions of someone who dealt with danger before. The thought both reassured and troubled her. "Jack," she said softly, "you don't have to do this. This isn't your fight." He paused his preparations and turned to face her. "I made it my fight the moment I brought you here." "That's exactly what worries me." Kayla stood up, pacing the small kitchen. "Derek, my ex-husband, he doesn't just get angry, he destroys things. People." Her voice cracked. I've seen what he does to anyone who tries to help me." Jack stepped closer, his presence steady and calm. "I'm not exactly easy to destroy, Kayla." She looked up at him, at the tattoos covering his arms, the weathered face, the gentle eyes that contrasted with his intimidating appearance. "Neither were some of the others who tried to help. Derek has connections. Bad ones." "So did I, once upon a time," Jackie replied, his voice low. "I know how men like him think, how they operate." Kayla picked up Noah, who immediately snuggled against her shoulder. "I keep thinking about what happens if he finds us here, what he might do." She glanced around the cabin, at the worn but comfortable furniture, the pictures on the walls, the life Jack had built here. "I can't be responsible for destroying your home, your peace." Jack moved to the window, scanning the tree line out of habit. "Peace isn't worth much if it means turning my back on someone who needs help." "But why?" Kayla asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why risk everything for us? You barely know me." "Because someone once did the same for me," Jack replied, turning back to face her. "When I was at my lowest, someone saw past what I was and believed in who I could be." He gestured to the cabin around them. "Everything I have now, this life, this second chance, I owe it to that moment of kindness." Kayla watched as he continued preparing, checking his phone's battery, making sure the motorcycle had a full tank of gas. His confidence should have been reassuring, but she couldn't shake the knot of anxiety in her stomach. Images of Derek's rage flashed through her mind. Furniture smashed, walls punched through, the aftermath of his violent temper. "We should leave," Jack said finally, shouldering the duffel bag. "At least for a few days, until we figure out our next move." Kayla nodded, but her feet felt heavy as she gathered Noah's things. Jack helped her pack a small bag of their clothes and necessities, his movements efficient but gentle. As they stood by the door, ready to leave, Kayla caught her reflection in the window. Her face was drawn with worry, dark circles under her eyes betraying her sleepless night. She looked at Jack, who was securing Noah's car seat to his motorcycle with practiced care. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not just of Derek finding us, but of what he might do to you. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of me." The cabin felt like a fortress and a prison all at once. Jack had drawn the curtains, casting the room in a dim light that matched their somber mood. Noah napped peacefully in his portable crib, while Kayla sat cross-legged on the worn leather couch, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. "We should be safe here for now," Jack said, settling into his favorite armchair. "Nobody knows about this place except a handful of people I trust." Kayla nodded, but her eyes kept darting to the windows. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of the cabin's old wood made her flinch. "I used to jump at sounds like that in our old house," she said quietly. "Never knew if it was just the house settling or him coming home angry." Jack leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Tell me about it. Sometimes talking helps." She took a deep breath. "It wasn't always bad. In the beginning, Derek was different, charming even. But then he started drinking more, getting involved with the wrong people." Her voice trembled. "The first time he hit me, he cried afterward, promised it would never happen again. I believed him." "That's how they get you," Jack said softly. "I've seen it before. Hell, I used to be part of that world." Kayla looked up, meeting his eyes. "What changed for you?" Jack rubbed his beard thoughtfully. "Had a friend, Tommy. We were both deep in the life. Drugs, violence, you name it. One night things went bad during a deal. Tommy took a bullet meant for me." He paused, his voice growing hoarse. "His last words were begging me to get out, to be better than this life we'd chosen. The silence that followed felt heavy with shared pain. Outside, a bird called out, its song muffled by the drawn curtains. "I still dream about the last night with Derek," Kayla confessed. "Noah was crying, and Derek was screaming, throwing things. I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before, like he wasn't even human anymore. That's when I knew we had to leave." "You did the right thing," Jack assured her. "Taking Noah and running, that took real courage." "Sometimes I don't feel brave at all," she whispered. "I feel broken. Damaged." Jack stood up and moved to sit beside her on the couch. "Broken things can be fixed, Kayla. Trust me on that." She looked at him. Really looked at him, seeing past the tattoos and scars to the gentle soul beneath. "How did you do it? How did you rebuild yourself after everything?" "One day at a time," he said. "Found this place, started over, learned to forgive myself, even though some days that's still the hardest part." Tears welled up in Kayla's eyes. Without thinking, Jack opened his arms to her. For a moment she hesitated, years of learned fear making her body tense. Then, slowly, she leaned into his embrace. His arms were strong but gentle, and she could hear his steady heartbeat. For the first time in what felt like forever, Kayla allowed herself to relax, to feel safe. Jack's hand moved in soothing circles on her back as she cried quietly against his chest. But even in this moment of peace, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered warnings. Could she really trust him to protect her and Noah? Or would Derek's rage destroy this sanctuary too, just like he'd destroyed everything else she'd ever loved? The morning sun barely filtered through the cabin's windows when the sound of tires on gravel broke the peaceful silence. Jack was in the kitchen making coffee while Kayla fed Noah his breakfast. At the noise, they both froze. Through the window, Jack spotted a beaten-up pickup truck parking crookedly in front of the cabin. A man stumbled out, swaying slightly as he slammed the door. Even from this distance, Jack could smell the alcohol. "It's him," Kayla whispered, her face going pale. She clutched Noah closer to her chest, her hands trembling. "It's Derek." Jack's jaw tightened. "Take Noah to the back bedroom. Lock the door. Don't come out until I say it's safe." Kayla hesitated for a moment, then nodded and hurried down the hallway with Noah. The sound of the bedroom door clicking shut echoed through the cabin, just as heavy footsteps thundered up the porch steps. "Kayla," Derek's voice boomed through the door. "I know you're in there. Get out here with my son." Jack took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. He'd handled worse situations in his past life, but now he had more to lose. Opening the door, he filled the frame with his imposing presence, arms crossed over his chest. Derek's bloodshot eyes widened slightly at the sight of Jack's tattoos and muscular build, but liquid courage made him bold. "Who the hell are you? Where's my wife?" "She's not your wife anymore," Jack said calmly, though his heart was racing. "And she doesn't want to see you." "Like hell she doesn't." Derek tried to push past Jack, but Jack didn't budge. "That's my son in there. You can't keep me from him." "Actually, I can." Jack's voice remained steady, but there was steel beneath the words. "You lost that right when you raised your fists to them." Derek's face twisted with rage. "You don't know anything about my family. Kayla," he shouted over Jack's shoulder. "Get out here now." "Lower your voice," Jack warned. "You're drunk and you're trespassing. This is private property." "I'll show you trespassing." Derek pulled back his fist, but Jack saw it coming. He caught Derek's wrist easily, using the man's momentum to push him back a few steps. "Don't," Jack said quietly. "You don't want to do this." Derek stumbled, catching himself on the porch railing. For a moment, something like fear flashed across his face as he realized he was outmatched. But pride and alcohol made him stupid. "This isn't over," he snarled. "That's my son in there. You think you can play daddy to him? You're nothing but a thug." "Maybe," Jack agreed. "But I'm the thug who's telling you to leave. Now." Derek spat on the porch. "Tell Kayla I'll be back. She can't hide forever. That kid needs his real father." "What they need is peace," Jack said. "And if you come back here, you won't find me so calm next time." Their eyes locked in a tense standoff. Finally, Derek turned away, stumbling back to his truck. The engine roared to life, and he backed out recklessly, spraying gravel. "This isn't over," he shouted through the window before speeding away, the truck weaving slightly on the dirt road. Jack watched until the truck disappeared around the bend, his heart heavy with the knowledge that Derek was right about one thing. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Jack closed the door and took a deep breath, his hands still shaking slightly from the confrontation. "Kayla," he called out softly. "It's safe now. He's gone." The bedroom door clicked open, and Kayla emerged with Noah held tightly against her chest. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying. She walked toward Jack slowly, her legs unsteady. "I heard everything," she whispered. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "I was so scared he would hurt you." "Hey, it's okay now," Jack said gently. He reached out and touched her shoulder, and that simple contact broke something inside her. Kayla's composure crumbled completely. With Noah balanced on one hip, she fell against Jack's chest, her free hand clutching his shirt. Hot tears soaked through the fabric as she sobbed. Jack wrapped his arms around both of them, creating a protective circle with his body. "Thank you," she managed between sobs. "Thank you for protecting us. I don't know what I would have done if—" "Shh," Jack murmured, running his hand soothingly up and down her back. "You don't have to think about that. I'm here. I'll always be here." Noah reached up and patted Jack's beard with his tiny hand, making a small cooing sound that somehow lightened the heavy moment. Jack couldn't help but smile, and he saw Kayla's lips twitch upward too, despite her tears. They stood, like that for a long while, until Kayla's breathing steadied and Noah started to squirm. Jack guided them to the couch, keeping one arm around Kayla's shoulders as they sat down. "I keep putting you in danger," Kayla said quietly, adjusting Noah on her lap. "You didn't ask for any of this. You don't deserve to have my problems dumped on you." Jack turned to face her, his expression serious. "Listen to me, Kayla. You're not dumping anything on me. I choose to be here. I choose to help you and Noah." Kayla looked up at him, her eyes swimming with fresh tears. "But why? Why would you risk everything for us?" "Because—" Jack paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because sometimes life puts people in our path for a reason. When I saw you that day in the rain, something told me I needed to stop. And every day since then has only confirmed that feeling." Kayla was quiet for a moment, absently stroking Noah's hair as he dozed against her chest. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm starting to care about you, Jack, and that terrifies me." "I know," he said softly. "The last time I cared about someone, he turned into a monster." Her voice trembled. "I'm so scared of making the same mistake again, of trusting the wrong person, of getting Noah hurt." Jack took her free hand in his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I'm not going anywhere, Kayla. No matter what comes our way, no matter how hard things get, I'll be right here, protecting you both. That's a promise." She looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. In his eyes, she saw nothing but sincerity and warmth. For the first time in years, she felt truly safe. The morning sun filtered through the cabin's windows, casting warm patches of light across the wooden floor. Jack stood at the stove, flipping pancakes while Noah sat in his high chair, happily making a mess with his breakfast. Kayla watched them from the kitchen doorway, her heart both warming and aching at the sight. Over the past few days, Jack had settled into a routine with them as if they'd always been there. He'd wake up early to make breakfast, play with Noah during the day, and spend quiet evenings with them on the porch. It was everything Kayla had ever wanted in a family, and that terrified her. "Someone's got quite an appetite this morning," Jack chuckled as Noah stuffed another piece of pancake into his mouth. His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and Kayla felt that familiar flutter in her chest. She forced herself to look away, busying herself with wiping down the counter. Every gentle gesture, every kind word from Jack made her walls crack just a little more. But those walls were there for a reason. They protected her, protected Noah. "You okay?" Jack's voice was soft as he placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You seem far away this morning." Kayla stiffened at his touch, though her body yearned to lean into it. "I'm fine," she said, perhaps too quickly. "Just thinking." Jack didn't push, but she could feel his concern. He always seemed to know when something was bothering her, and that scared her too. How had he learned to read her so well in such a short time? Later that afternoon, while Noah napped, they sat on the porch swing. The gentle creaking of the chains filled the silence between them. Jack's arm rested on the back of the swing, not quite touching her, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "You know you can talk to me, right?" he said finally, breaking the quiet. "About anything." Kayla wrapped her arms around herself, creating a physical barrier between them. "I know," she whispered. "But you won't." It wasn't a question. She closed her eyes, fighting back tears. "I can't." "Why?" His voice was gentle, patient, but she could hear the hurt underneath. "Because..." She took a shaky breath. "Because everyone I've ever opened up to has either left or hurt me, and I can't do that again. I can't let Noah go through that again." Jack turned to face her, his eyes intense. "Kayla, look at me." When she did, he continued. "I need to tell you something, and I know it might scare you, but I have to say it. I'm falling in love with you. Both of you. And I..." "Stop!" Kayla cut him off, standing up abruptly. Her hands were shaking. "Please don't!" "Kayla, I'm not ready," she said, her voice breaking. I can't do this, Jack. I'm sorry, but I'm not ready for a relationship. I don't know if I'll ever be ready." She saw the hope drain from his eyes, replaced by a deep sadness that made her heart clench. But she couldn't take it back. She couldn't risk opening her heart again, not even for this kind, gentle man who had given them so much. "I understand," Jack said quietly, though his voice was heavy with disappointment. "I won't push you." Kayla wrapped her arms tighter around herself, fighting the urge to take back her words, to run into his arms. Instead, she turned away, leaving him alone on the porch as she retreated to the safety of the cabin's walls. The tension in the cabin was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jack sat at the kitchen table, his coffee growing cold as he watched Kayla pace back and forth, checking the windows every few minutes. Noah played quietly in the corner, somehow sensing the heaviness in the air. "He's not going to give up," Kayla muttered, more to herself than to Jack. "He never gives up." Jack's fingers tightened around his coffee mug. "Then we'll handle it, together." "There is no we, Jack." Kayla's voice cracked. "This is my problem, my mess." "Talk to me," Jack pleaded, standing up. "Please, let me help you carry this burden." Kayla shook her head, backing away from him. "You don't understand. Every time I let someone in, it only makes things worse. He destroys everything good in my life. I'm not afraid of him, Jack said firmly. Well, I am. Kayla's voice rose, causing Noah to look up from his toys. She lowered, her voice again. I'm terrified. Not just of him, but of... She trailed off, wrapping her arms around herself. Of what? Jack took a step toward her, but she moved away. Of this. Of you. Tears welled up in her eyes. Of how much I want to stay here with you. Of how safe you make me feel. Because it won't last. It never lasts. Jack's heart ached. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Kayla wiped her eyes. Look at you, Jack. You've built this peaceful life here. You've worked so hard to leave your past behind. And what am I doing? I'm dragging you right back into violence and chaos. That's not true. It is true, Kayla's voice broke. My ex-husband won't stop until he gets what he wants. He'll keep coming back, keep threatening us, keep making our lives hell. And one day you'll realize it's not worth it. That I'm not worth it. Jack reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Kayla, please. No. She walked over to Noah and picked him up. I can't do this anymore. I can't watch. You throw away everything you've built for someone like me. Someone like you? Jack's voice was rough with emotion. You mean someone strong? Someone brave? Someone who'd do anything to protect her child? Tears streamed down Kayla's face as she gathered Noah's things. I mean someone broken. Someone who brings nothing but trouble. She looked at Jack, her eyes full of pain. You deserve better than that. Better than me. That's not your decision to make, Jack said, his voice tight with desperation. Yes, it is. Kayla's hands shook as she packed Noah's diaper bag. I'm leaving, Jack. Tonight. Please don't try to stop me. Jack stood frozen, watching as she packed their few belongings. Every fiber of his being wanted to argue, to convince her to stay, but he recognized the determination in her eyes. The same determination he'd seen when she first told him about fleeing her ex-husband. Where will you go? He asked softly. It's better if you don't know. Kayla hoisted the bag over, her shoulder holding Noah close. She paused at the door, turning back one last time. Thank you, Jack, for everything. Jack watched helplessly as she walked out the door, taking his heart with her. The silence she left behind was deafening. The screen door slammed shut behind Kayla, the sound echoing through Jack's cabin like a gunshot. He stood rooted to the spot, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, watching through the window as she made her way down the gravel path. Noah's little head rested on her shoulder, his small hand waving goodbye. Jack's throat tightened. He wanted to run after them, to tell Kayla she was wrong about everything. But what right did he have? Maybe she was right. Maybe his past made him unworthy of the happiness he'd found with them. The cabin felt different already. Colder. Emptier. Jack walked slowly through the rooms, his footsteps heavy on the wooden floors. In the guest bedroom, a stuffed bear lay forgotten on the floor. Noah's favorite toy. The sight of it made his chest ache. He picked up the bear, its soft fur worn from countless hugs. Just yesterday, he'd watched Noah clutch it while falling asleep, Kayla humming softly beside him. Now they were gone, leaving nothing but memories and a hollow space in his heart. In the kitchen, 2 coffee mugs sat in the sink, his and hers. Jack stared at them, remembering their morning conversations, the way Kayla's eyes would crinkle when she smiled over the rim of her cup. He'd gotten used to making coffee for 2, to hearing Noah's babbling at breakfast time, to feeling like part of a family. Damn it, he muttered, running a hand over his face. He shouldn't have let her get so close, shouldn't have opened his heart to the possibility of happiness. People like him didn't get happy endings. His past had taught him that much. The silence in the cabin pressed in on him. No more sounds of Noah's laughter. No more soft conversations with Kayla late into the night. Just the empty rooms and his own thoughts for company. Jack sank into his old armchair, the one where he'd held Noah during thunderstorms, where Kayla had fallen asleep reading stories to her son. The leather creaked under his weight, and he noticed a small toy car wedged between the cushions. Another reminder of what he'd lost. His gaze fell on his motorcycle jacket hanging by the door, the patches and worn leather telling stories of his past life. Was Kayla right? Had he been fooling himself, thinking he could leave that life behind and build something new? Something good? The sky outside grew darker, matching his mood. Rain began to fall, just like the day he'd first met them. He remembered Kayla's suspicious eyes when he'd offered help, the way she'd gradually learned to trust him. And now she was gone, taking with her all the warmth and purpose he'd found in his life. Jack stood up and walked to the window, pressing his forehead against the cool glass. Somewhere out there, Kayla and Noah were heading into an uncertain future, running from their past just as he had once done. But unlike him, they were running from someone who wouldn't give up easily. The thought of them alone and vulnerable made his stomach churn. He'd promised to protect them, but in the end, he couldn't even protect them from their own fears. His own past had cast too long a shadow. The cabin felt like a tomb now, filled with ghostly echoes of happiness he'd briefly tasted. Jack stood in the growing darkness, surrounded by the remnants of their short time together, wondering if he'd made the biggest mistake of his life by letting them walk away. Jack paced the length of his cabin, unable to shake the image of Kayla and Noah walking away. 3 days had passed, but the ache in his chest only grew stronger. Sleep eluded him, replaced by endless replays of their last conversation and the hurt in Kayla's eyes. He grabbed Noah's forgotten teddy bear from the kitchen counter where he'd left it, running his thumb over its worn fur. The stuffed animal still carried the faint scent of baby powder and the sweet smell that was uniquely Noah's. Jack's throat tightened. "This isn't right," he muttered to himself, clutching the bear. "I can't just let them go." Moving to his bedroom, Jack pulled out a duffel bag from under his bed. His hands trembled slightly as he started packing. A few changes of clothes, some cash he'd been saving, and a photo of the 3 of them that Kayla had taken with her phone and printed. In it, Noah sat on Jack's shoulders, both of them grinning while Kayla looked up at them with pure joy. The memory hit him like a physical blow. They'd been happy here, despite everything. Despite his past, despite her fears, they'd found something real, something worth fighting for. Jack walked to his desk and pulled out a worn notebook. He'd been making calls these past few days, discreetly asking around about Kayla. A friend who worked at the bus station had seen her boarding a bus to Cedar Grove, a small town about 50 miles north. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He studied the local map spread across his desk, tracing the route with his finger. Cedar Grove had 2 women's shelters, likely places for Kayla to seek refuge. His motorcycle could make the journey in less than an hour, but finding her in an unfamiliar town would take time. The weight of Noah's teddy bear in his jacket pocket reminded him of what was at stake. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about a little boy who'd called him Daddy, and a woman who'd shown him that love was still possible, even for someone with his past. Jack grabbed his leather jacket and helmet, then paused at the door. Doubt crept in. What if Kayla was right? What if his presence in their lives would only bring more trouble? He shook his head, pushing the thoughts away. Some risks were worth taking. The familiar rumble of his motorcycle brought a small measure of comfort as he kicked it to life. The evening, Air was cool against his face as he pulled out of his driveway, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Each mile that passed under his wheels strengthened his resolve. He'd been running from his past for so long, letting it define him, letting it stop him from reaching for happiness. But not anymore. Kayla and Noah had shown him a different path, a chance at redemption he never thought possible. His muscles tensed as fatigue started setting in, but Jack pushed on. The highway stretched endlessly before him, empty except for the occasional passing car. In his mind, he could hear Noah's innocent voice. "Mommy says you're my daddy." Those words had changed everything, opening his heart to possibilities he'd long since abandoned. The road signs for Cedar Grove began appearing, and Jack felt a surge of determination. Somewhere in this town, Kayla and Noah were trying to start over. But this time, they wouldn't have to do it alone. He wouldn't let them slip away, without a fight. The Cedar Grove Women's Shelter stood at the end of a quiet street, its faded brick walls and well-tended flower beds giving it a homey feel, despite its institutional purpose. Jack parked his motorcycle across the street, his heart pounding as he spotted Kayla through one of the ground-floor windows. She was folding laundry while Noah played with blocks on a worn carpet nearby. Jack's hands trembled as he pulled Noah's teddy bear from his jacket pocket. 3 days of searching, and here she was. The sight of her made his chest ache. Even in this simple moment, doing mundane chores, she was beautiful. He crossed the street slowly, giving her time to notice him through the window. When she looked up and saw him, her hands froze mid-fold. Their eyes met through the glass, and Jack saw a whirlwind of emotions cross her face. Surprise, fear, longing, and something else he couldn't quite read. Kayla set down the shirt she was folding and walked to the shelter's entrance. Jack waited on the sidewalk, not wanting to intrude on what she considered safe space. When she emerged, she kept the door propped open with her foot, ready to retreat if needed. "What are you doing here, Jack?" Her voice was soft but guarded. "I couldn't let you just disappear," he said, taking a careful step forward. "Not without trying to make things right." Noah spotted Jack through the window and pressed his tiny hands against the glass, face lighting up with recognition. The sight made Jack's throat tight. "I left for a reason," Kayla said, wrapping her arms around herself. "Nothing's changed. My ex is still out there, and I can't drag you into my mess." "You're not dragging me anywhere," Jack replied. "I'm choosing to be here. I'm choosing you and Noah." A volunteer inside the shelter called Noah away from the window, and Kayla glanced back to make sure he was okay. When she turned back to Jack, her eyes were glistening. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Everyone I've ever loved ends up getting hurt. I can't watch that happen to you too." Jack pulled Noah's teddy bear from his pocket and held it out. "He forgot this," he said. "But that's not the only reason I'm here. I'm here because the past 3 days have been hell without you two, because that cabin isn't home anymore unless you're both in it." Kayla's hand trembled as she reached for the bear. "Jack, listen to me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't care about your ex. I don't care about the risks. What I care about is you and that little boy in there, and I'm not leaving until we figure this out." A tear slipped down Kayla's cheek. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I," Jack said. "But I'm more scared of losing you both than I am of anything else. Let me be here for you, Kayla. Let me be there for Noah. We can face whatever comes together." Kayla clutched Noah's teddy bear to her chest, looking between Jack and the shelter's entrance. The internal struggle was clear on her face. The desire to protect herself, warring with the hope of something more. "I'm not going anywhere," Jack said firmly. "No matter what you decide right now, I'll be right here. Take all the time you need, but know that I'm not giving up on us." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of Jack's words hanging between them. A gentle breeze rustled the flowers in the shelter's garden, carrying with it the sound of children playing inside. Noah's teddy bear remained clutched tight against Kayla's chest, like a shield between her heart and the world. Jack took another careful step forward, close enough now that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the stubble on his jaw that spoke of sleepless nights. His leather vest, usually worn with such confidence, seemed to hang heavy on his shoulders. "I know what you're thinking," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "You're thinking about all the ways this could go wrong, all the promises that have been broken before." Kayla's lower lip trembled. "It's not just about me anymore, Jack. I have Noah to think about. He's already been through so much." "That's exactly why I'm here," Jack interrupted, running a hand through his graying beard. "That little boy in there? He deserves a chance at a real family, and you deserve someone who will stand by you, no matter what storms come our way." Inside the shelter, Noah's laughter echoed through the window, making Kayla's heart clench. She looked down at the teddy bear in her hands, remembering how Jack had taught Noah to give the bear gentle high fives before bedtime. "I want to give you both the world," Jack continued, his voice rough with emotion. "I know I'm not perfect. I've got my own demons, my own past. But when I'm with you and Noah, I feel like I can be better. Like I already am better." Tears spilled onto Kayla's cheeks. "I'm so scared, Jack. Every time I close my eyes, I see everything falling apart. I see him finding us, hurting you. I see Noah crying, and Hey!" Jack stepped closer, close enough to touch her but holding back. "Look at me, Kayla." She raised her eyes to meet his, seeing nothing but sincerity in their depths. "I'm not him," Jack said firmly. "I will never be him. I've spent my whole life running from commitment, from love, from anything real. But you and Noah? You make me want to stop running. You make me want to build something lasting." Kayla's hands shook as she wiped at her tears. "I want to believe you. God, Jack, I want to believe you so much it hurts. But every time I start to hope..." "Then let's take it slow," Jack offered. "One day at a time. I'm not asking you to forget everything that's happened. I'm just asking for a chance to prove that not everyone leaves, that some people stay and fight for what matters." Noah appeared at the window again, pressing his face against the glass and waving excitedly at Jack. Despite herself, Kayla felt a smile tugging at her lips. "He misses you," she admitted softly. "He keeps asking when we're going back to your house." "I miss him too," Jack's voice cracked slightly. "I miss both of you. That cabin, it's too quiet without you there. Too empty." Kayla hugged the teddy bear tighter, feeling her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. "I'm terrified of letting myself trust again," she whispered, "of letting myself need someone. What if I'm not strong enough to survive being broken again?" "You're the strongest person I know," Jack said, "but you don't have to be strong alone anymore. Let me help carry the weight. Let me be there for both of you." Kayla watched as Noah pressed his small hands against the window glass, leaving tiny fingerprints that caught the afternoon light. Her son's eyes were fixed on Jack, filled with the pure, unconditional love that only children could give. The teddy bear slipped from her grip, landing softly on the shelter's wooden porch. "He sees something in you," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something I've been trying so hard to ignore." Jack stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. The leather of his vest creaked softly as he moved. "What's that?" "The good in you. The way you look at him like he's the most precious thing in the world." Kayla's hands trembled as she wrapped her arms around herself. "The way you look at me like I'm worth fighting for." "You are worth fighting for." Jack's voice was rough with emotion. "Both of you are." Inside the shelter, Noah had disappeared from the window, but his laughter still floated out to them, mixing with the sounds of other children playing. Kayla closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her. When she opened them again, tears were streaming down her face. "I tried so hard not to fall in love with you," she admitted, the words catching in her throat. "I told myself it was too dangerous, too risky, that I was just setting myself up for more pain." Jack's breath caught audibly. He took another step forward, close, enough now that she could see the hope blooming in his eyes. "And now?" "Now?" Kayla let out a shaky laugh that was half sob. "Now I realize I've been in love with you since that first night in your cabin, when you made soup for Noah and didn't ask anything in return, when you looked at us like we weren't broken things that needed fixing." "Kayla." Jack breathed her name like a prayer. "I love you," she said, the words rushing out like water breaking through a dam. "I love how gentle you are with Noah, how patient you've been with me. I love that you came looking for us, that you didn't give up even when I pushed you away." Jack reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. When she didn't move, he gently wiped the tears from her cheeks with calloused thumbs. "I love you too, both of you, more than I ever thought possible." Kayla leaned into his touch, letting herself feel the warmth of his hands. "I'm still scared," she admitted. "But I'm more scared of losing this chance at happiness than I am of taking it." "We'll take it one day at a time," Jack promised. "We'll build something new, something strong. Together." Noah's voice called out from inside, "Mommy! Jack!" The joy in his voice was unmistakable. "He needs a father," Kayla said softly. "A real one. Someone who will love him and protect him." "Let me be that for him." Jack's voice was thick with emotion. "Let me be there for both of you. We can start fresh. Build the life we all deserve." Kayla looked up at him. Really looked at him. Past the tattoos and the leather vest, past the tough exterior, to the man who had opened his heart and his home to them. The man who had chosen them, again and again. "Yes," she whispered, then stronger. "Yes, let's build something together." The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the half-empty apartment as Jack carried the last box up 3 flights of stairs. Sweat glistened on his forehead, making his beard glisten. The box, labeled "Kitchen" in Kayla's neat handwriting, joined the small mountain of cardboard in their new living room. "That's the last one," he announced, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. His leather vest hung on a hook by the door, the only thing they'd unpacked so far. Kayla stood in the middle of the room, Noah balanced on her hip. The toddler was fascinated by the way sunlight streamed through the bare windows, creating patterns on the hardwood floors. "I can't believe this is really happening," she said softly, touching the wall as if to make sure it was real. The apartment wasn't fancy, just a modest 2-bedroom unit in a quiet neighborhood. But it was theirs. A fresh start. The walls were painted a warm cream color, and the kitchen, though small, had windows that looked out over a park. "Here," Jack said, pulling a box cutter from his pocket. "Let's start with the kitchen stuff. Little man's probably hungry." Noah squealed in agreement, reaching for Jack with grabby hands. Without hesitation, Jack took him from Kayla, settling the boy naturally against his chest. The sight still made Kayla's heart skip, this big, tough man being so gentle with her son. They worked together, unpacking boxes and finding homes for their modest collection of belongings. Jack had brought his few possessions from the cabin, and Kayla had what little she'd managed to save from her previous life. But somehow, when mixed together, it started feeling like a home. Noah helped by pulling pots and pans from boxes, creating an impromptu drum set on the floor. The sound of his laughter echoed off the bare walls, filling the space with joy. "Look what I found," Jack said, pulling something from a box. It was the teddy bear from the shelter, the one Noah had dropped so many times. He'd carefully washed it, and now it looked almost new. Noah's face lit up. "Bear!" he exclaimed, abandoning his pots and pans to grab the stuffed animal. Kayla watched them together, her throat tight with emotion. Jack sat cross-legged on the floor, helping Noah make the bear dance. His tattoos stood out starkly against his white t-shirt, but there was nothing threatening about him now. He was just a man, playing with a child who was quickly becoming his son in every way that mattered. As the sun began to set, they ordered pizza, their first meal in their new home. They sat on the floor, using boxes as tables, paper plates balanced on their laps. Noah had sauce all over his face, and Jack wasn't much cleaner. "We need to get a dining table," Kayla said, but she was smiling. "And chairs, and curtains, and—" "We'll get it all," Jack assured her, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "One day at a time, remember?" Noah crawled into Jack's lap, teddy bear clutched in one sticky hand. He yawned widely, his eyes starting to droop. "Story?" he asked sleepily. "Of course, buddy," Jack said, his voice soft. He pulled Noah closer, the bear squished between them. "Once upon a time there was a brave little boy and his mommy who found a new home." Kayla leaned back against a box, watching her little family. The apartment was still mostly empty, full of boxes and echoey spaces waiting to be filled. But as Noah drifted off to sleep in Jack's arms, his teddy bear held tight, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Pure, simple peace. The weekend arrived with golden sunshine and gentle breezes. Jack stood by the apartment window, watching the neighborhood come alive. Saturday morning joggers passed by, and the park across the street filled with families and their children. "Ready for our adventure?" Kayla asked, emerging from Noah's room with the toddler freshly dressed in tiny jeans and a red t-shirt. His teddy bear, as always, was tucked safely under his arm. "Ready as I'll ever be," Jack replied, his voice warm. He'd swapped his usual leather vest for a plain black t-shirt, trying to look less intimidating to their new neighbors. They started their day at the local farmer's market, just 2 blocks from their apartment. Noah rode high on Jack's shoulders, pointing excitedly at the colorful displays of fruits and vegetables. The vendors smiled at them, offering Noah little samples of sweet strawberries and crisp apple slices. "Try this," Jack said, holding up a piece of honey-drizzled peach to Kayla's lips. She accepted it with a smile, the sweetness spreading across her tongue. For a moment she forgot about their past troubles, lost in the simple pleasure of sharing food with someone she loved. They bought fresh bread from a local baker and some cheese for a picnic lunch. Noah charmed everyone they met, his infectious giggles drawing smiles from even the most serious-looking shoppers. Jack noticed how people's initial wariness of his tattooed arms and gruff appearance melted away when they saw him with Noah and Kayla. At the park, they spread out a blanket under a maple tree. Noah immediately wanted to explore the playground, so Jack took him while Kayla arranged their picnic. She watched them from afar, her tough, former Hell's Angel boyfriend carefully helping her son climb the little slide, catching him at the bottom with strong, gentle hands. "Higher!" Noah squealed as Jack pushed him on the swing. Other parents nearby smiled at the sight of the big man making airplane noises and playing peekaboo behind the swing set. After lunch, they walked through their new neighborhood, discovering hidden gems, a tiny bookstore with a children's reading corner, an ice cream shop where the owner gave Noah an extra scoop just because, and a community garden full of butterflies that made Noah gasp in wonder. As the afternoon wound down, they found themselves back in the park. Noah had fallen asleep in his stroller, clutching his teddy bear. Jack and Kayla sat on a bench nearby, their shoulders touching, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "I never thought I'd have this," Kayla said, softly, her hand finding Jack's. "A real family." Jack squeezed her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "You know, I spent years thinking I didn't deserve anything good in my life, that my past defined who I was." They looked at Noah, peaceful in his sleep, then back at each other. The distance they'd come, from that rainy day when Jack first spotted Kayla under her broken umbrella, seemed both vast and inevitable. "Family isn't about where you come from," Kayla said, leaning her head against Jack's shoulder. "It's about who chooses to stay, who chooses to love." Jack wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. They sat in comfortable silence, watching other families in the park, all different shapes and sizes, all bound together by love rather than just blood. Noah stirred slightly in his sleep, and both Jack and Kayla instinctively reached to adjust his blanket, their hands meeting in the middle. The smell of fresh paint filled the living room as Kayla carefully rolled a warm, honey-colored stripe down the wall. Noah sat in his playpen nearby, stacking blocks and babbling happily to his teddy bear. Jack worked beside her, his muscular arms making quick work of the higher sections they couldn't reach without a ladder. "You missed a spot," Kayla teased, pointing to a tiny white patch near the ceiling. Jack grinned and dabbed her nose with his paint roller, leaving a golden dot. "Now you've missed a spot too." She laughed, the sound bouncing off the bare walls of their new home. It still amazed her how natural it felt, being here, being happy, being safe. The apartment wasn't fancy, but it was theirs. Clean beige carpet stretched wall to wall, and sunlight poured through wide windows that overlooked their small backyard. In the corner, moving boxes waited to be unpacked. Kayla had been nervous about mixing her things with Jack's, worried their styles wouldn't match. But somehow, like everything else between them, it just worked. His leather-bound books looked perfect next to her collection of paperbacks. Her soft throw pillows complemented his sturdy furniture. "Look what I found," Jack said, pulling something from a box. It was the broken umbrella from the day they met, the one she'd tried to shelter under with Noah during the rainstorm. She'd kept it, though she wasn't sure why. "I can't believe that was only 3 months ago," Kayla said softly, running her fingers along the umbrella's bent ribs. "I was so scared that day, of everything, of everyone." Jack set down his paint roller and wrapped his arms around her waist from behind. "You were the bravest person I'd ever met, still are." Noah squealed from his playpen, holding up a block triumphantly. They both turned to watch him, their hearts full. The little boy had changed too. He smiled more, laughed easier. He'd started calling Jack Dada last week, and though neither of them had discussed it, Kayla had seen tears in Jack's eyes the first time it happened. They worked through the afternoon, transforming the blank walls into something warm and inviting. Jack hung curtains while Kayla arranged photos on the wall, snapshots of their new life together. There was one of Noah's first trip to the zoo, another of Jack teaching him to feed ducks at the park, and several of the three of them just being together. "Remember how I used to jump every time someone knocked at the door?" Kayla asked, arranging throw pillows on their second-hand couch. "Or how I'd check the locks 3 times before bed." Jack nodded, understanding in his eyes. "You don't do that anymore." "Because I finally feel safe," she said simply. "You helped me find my strength again." The afternoon light softened into evening, casting long shadows across their freshly painted walls. Jack opened the sliding glass door that led to their small back porch, and the three of them settled into the patio furniture they'd found at a yard sale last weekend, Noah sat in Kayla's lap, pointing at birds as they flew overhead. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, a perfect ending to their busy day. Jack reached over and took Kayla's free hand in his, their fingers intertwining naturally. She turned to look at him, this man who had changed her life with one simple act of kindness on a rainy day. His eyes met hers, full of love and promise. He leaned in, and their lips met in a soft, tender kiss as Noah giggled between them and the sun sank lower in the sky. The dining room buzzed with warmth and laughter as Jack pulled another batch of garlic bread from the oven. The small table was crowded with mismatched plates and simple comfort food, spaghetti and meatballs, Caesar salad, and Jack's homemade bread that filled the apartment with its inviting aroma. Sarah from the shelter where Kayla had stayed sat next to Mike, the kind police officer who'd helped them file the restraining order against Kayla's ex. They'd both become dear friends during those difficult times, and now they were here to celebrate 3 months of Jack, Kayla, and Noah being a family. "This sauce is amazing," Sarah said, twirling more pasta onto her fork. "I can't believe our tough biker knows his way around a kitchen." Jack's cheeks reddened slightly as he settled into his chair. "My grandmother taught me. She always said a real man knows how to feed his family." Noah sat in his high chair between Jack and Kayla, his face covered in tomato sauce as he messily enjoyed his dinner. Kayla reached over with a napkin to wipe his chin, and the little boy giggled, reaching for Jack instead. "Dada clean," he demanded, making everyone at the table smile. "Can't argue with that," Jack said, taking the napkin from Kayla and gently cleaning Noah's face. The tenderness in his touch made Kayla's heart swell. Mike raised his glass of soda. "I've got to say, when I first met you two, I wouldn't have believed this moment was possible, but looking at you now," he shook his head, smiling. "Sometimes the best families are the ones we choose." Kayla felt tears prick at her eyes. "We wouldn't be here without both of you," she said softly. "Sarah, you gave me shelter when I had nowhere else to go. And Mike, you helped me feel safe again." "Hey now, no crying at the dinner table," Jack said, but his voice was thick with emotion, too. He reached under the table and squeezed Kayla's hand. The conversation flowed easily as they shared second helpings and caught up on each other's lives. Sarah was getting promoted at the shelter, and Mike had recently adopted a rescue dog. Noah entertained everyone by showing off his new words, proudly pointing at objects and naming them, some more accurately than others. As the evening wound down and their friends prepared to leave, hugs were exchanged and promises made to get together again soon. Sarah helped clear the table, while Mike entertained Noah one last time, making silly faces that had the little boy shrieking with delight. After their guests departed, and Noah was tucked into bed with his favorite stuffed bear, Jack and Kayla stood at the living room window. The city lights twinkled below them, and a nearly full moon hung in the clear night sky. Jack's arm wrapped around Kayla's waist, pulling her close. "Thank you," she whispered, leaning into his solid warmth. "For what? The dinner? Because I'm pretty sure I overcooked the meatballs." She shook her head, smiling. "For giving us a family. For loving Noah like he's your own. For making me believe in good things again." Jack turned to face her, his eyes soft in the moonlight. He took her hand in his, their fingers intertwining naturally. They stood together, watching the night sky, two people who had found each other in the most unexpected way and built something beautiful from the broken pieces of their past. The comfortable silence between them spoke volumes, of trust rebuilt, of love freely given, of a future they would face, together. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would meet them as a family. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.